I think that this election was the funeral for the Republican Party as we know it. The Republican Party, as we have known it, is dead. And voters have made that clear. And in particular, the folks who did not vote for Republicans in this last election were independent voters, working class independent voters, folks who voted for President Obama once upon a time, folks who then voted for President Trump but stayed home this time. We are not a majority party unless we can appeal to those voters.
Now, two things here. First, I agree with Josh Hawley in one sense. The Republican Party is dead. But on the flip side, not for the reasons that Josh Hawley thinks. In reality, if Hawley's looking for the culprit to raise his hand, I'm pretty sure that he already has. I mean, think about it. Hawley is the exact same brand of far-right, election-denying culture warrior that was so thoroughly and convincingly repudiated at the ballot box. The audacity of that guy to come forward and be like, the Republican Party needs a new way. They need my way. All while he's still got the blood of this latest loss fresh on his hands. In case you thought there was any self-awareness on the right, you'd be wrong. And so when Josh Hawley concedes that the GOP is not a majority party unless they can appeal to working class independent voters, what part of Josh Hawley's own agenda actually did that? At what point over the last couple of years was Josh Hawley actually trying to win over the working class? I mean, seriously, think about what this guy has done since he's been in office. Here he is vowing to clean house at the law enforcement agencies as part of his years-long tirade against the so-called deep state.
Well, I think what we've seen, Laura, in the last 2 years is we've gotten an up-close look at the corruption that is in our government, whether we're talking about the FBI, whether we're talking about DOJ, or whether we're talking about the kind of self-dealing that you have just outlined. And Republicans need to get serious about rooting out this corruption. It has got to be priority number one. Let's turn to DOJ. Let's turn to the FBI. Let's have a top-to-bottom review of what's going on at these increasingly corrupt agencies. It is time to give this government back to the American people. But, Laura, it's not going to happen unless we root out the corruption.
Was threatening to remove law enforcement agents who don't comport with your partisan agenda part of his appeal to working class voters? Or how about here, where he whines about pronouns and disparages the military and, for good measure, casts the GOP as the perpetual victims?
We've got a military that is more interested in pronouns than in winning wars. We've got an FBI that is more interested in treating parents as domestic terrorists than in prosecuting real terrorists. Did you ever think you'd live to see the day in the United States of America where if you want to go to a school board meeting that, by the way, you pay for a school that you pay for, to go talk about the things that your children are learning, if you want to do that and speak up, you get treated as a domestic terrorist? What country is this? That's Joe Biden's America. Is their vision for America? That's not our vision for America.
Is the whole pronoun shtick really part of Hawley's efforts to reach out to working class Americans? Or how about here, where he complains about the obvious kitchen table issue of censorship?
That is not true. You know what really is disinformation, Jesse? What's really disinformation is that the Biden administration believes in democracy. Because here's what they think. If you will do what they tell you to do and believe what they tell you to believe and vote the way they want, then they're for it. But if you want to have your own idea or speak your own mind or look into things for yourself, then they will monitor you, then they will censor you, then they will use the government against you. Jesse, that right there, that is a threat to our democracy, and we've got to do something about it.
Ah, yeah, censorship. Very clearly a top issue for working class Americans. And here he is railing against what he views as an attack on Christianity.
Is that what the war they really are waging, the cultural war they're most interested in, is right here in the United States of America. Well, right. It's America's, let's be honest, Christian culture that they don't like. It's the way that we live. It's the way that working people and middle-class folks live. It's the values that we hold. They don't like any of those things, and they want to destroy the economic underpinnings of America's middle class and working class. That's what this is about. That's why Joe Biden says stuff like, this is a necessary transition. Transition to what? To their secular, progressive utopia, I guess. Yeah. In the meantime, we all just have to suffer the consequences.
Because if there's one thing that working class Americans are worried about, it is imposing religious edicts onto everyone else so that we can all live in a Christian ethno-state. Just your regular run-of-the-mill working class stuff. So I'm sorry, but I just find it so funny that the same people who are coming forward now with their little post-mortems about the midterms never seem to acknowledge that they themselves are to blame for those same midterm losses that they're complaining about. And in fairness, it's not just Josh Hawley. Fittingly, here's Ted Cruz, the other Republican senator who tried to validate the big lie by objecting to the election results on January 6th, also bemoaning the GOP's midterm performance, while conveniently leaving out that he himself advanced the exact same extremist agenda that was so thoroughly rejected at the ballot box.
Up our sleeves and governing, and here's a lesson to take from last night. Look, why did the Democrats do better than expected? Because for 2 years, they've governed as liberals. They've governed as whacked-out lefty nut jobs. And you know what that did? That excited their base. That excited a bunch of young voters that came out in massive numbers, because when you actually stand for something, your base gets excited. There's a lesson for Republicans to learn, which is when we have a majority next year, we damn well better act like it and use it.
And here's the thing. Because these Republicans continue to refuse to acknowledge why they lost midterms, because they refuse to acknowledge that they themselves were to blame, none of these issues are actually going to get resolved. They'll carry on with the same bullshit platforms of whining about pronouns and pretending that there are litter boxes in classrooms, and, of course, the more insidious ones, like suggesting that the election was stolen or attempting to ban abortion. That's what Americans voted against. And the fact that Republicans refuse to acknowledge it is all the proof you need that when push comes to shove, these people have little to no interest in actually changing direction. And the flip side, of course, is that while Republicans have put forward arguably the least popular platform in modern American history, the Democrats have spent the last 2 years, with the thinnest of majorities, enacting the most popular agenda that they could. They passed funding to combat climate change. Popular. They passed legislation allowing the government to negotiate lower drug prices. Popular. They capped out-of-pocket costs for seniors at $2,000 a year and insulin at $35 a month. Popular. They ensured health care for sick veterans. Popular. They passed the CHIPS Act, which immediately led dozens of companies to invest hundreds of billions of dollars and add tens of thousands of jobs into manufacturing in the United States. Popular. They passed the first gun safety bill in 3 decades, which will take guns out of the hands of domestic abusers and fund red flag laws in the states and expand background checks for those between 18 and 20. Popular. And it's all paid for by imposing a 15% minimum tax on billion-dollar companies that pay zero, and by beefing up IRS enforcement on ultra-wealthy tax cheats. Popular. So I don't know, maybe between Democrats running on an agenda solely catered toward making the lives of middle-class Americans easier, and Republicans on an agenda of imposing Christo-fascist rule onto everyone, the choice became a little easier to folks this midterm cycle. So look, I'm not here to give Republicans any campaign advice, and frankly, if they want to cast blame everywhere other than the actual problem, God knows I'm not going to stop them. They got themselves into this mess by being self-important theocrats disinterested in the will of the people. Let's just say that old habits die hard. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.